Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace is directed by George Lucas and tells the story of two Jedi, Qui-Gon Jinn, played by Liam Neeson, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, played by Ewan McGregor, who go to settle a dispute with the Trade Federation. Later on, they encounter a young boy named Anakin Skywalker, played by Jake Lloyd, who they feel like is strong with the Force. So before I continue any further with this, happy May 4th, everybody. I don't feel like there's a better day to talk some Star Wars. I'm pretty excited to do this, and I will be trying to review as much Star Wars content as possible leading up to the release of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. So, may the 4th be with you, and let's get to this. So, of course, this film opens up with the really classic opening crawl, as a Star Wars film should, with the John Williams music playing in the background. And that just gives me chills. If that doesn't give you chills, you're just not a Star Wars fan. I'm sorry. Though I will say the plot described in the opening crawl is one of the most boring plots I've ever heard of. It just kind of feels like, oh, well, we ran out of ideas, so here we are. And of course, we start our journey out with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn, a Master Jedi and an Apprentice Jedi. And right from the get-go, the writing in this movie is extremely dull. That's right, it's a script written by George Lucas, the mastermind behind THX 1138's American Graffiti and Star Wars Episode 4 New Hope. What's happened to you, George? Now, Ewan McGregor and Liam Neeson are both decent actors in this film, don't get me wrong, but it's the writing that's just really killing their performances. It's really bringing them down. I feel like they could have given us something much better if it wasn't for this very, very dull writing. And the color grading in this film from the get-go is just so dull and lifeless. It's like George Lucas didn't really care to give us a story. It was just kind of flashy, and he just wanted to be in front of a blue screen and say, hey, look how many special effects I could use in the year 1999.
Special effects are just a tool, a means of telling a story. People have a tendency to confuse them as an end to themselves. A special effect without a story is a pretty boring thing.
No kidding. You don't say. Eventually in this first act we do get lightsabers, and it emits some of the best color you can see in this film and actually brings a little bit of life to it, so that's good. But the problem with the lightsaber sequences is they're just framed so badly in this first act. I mean, there's a scene where Obi-Wan Kenobi actually literally goes off frame during action. It's like George Lucas forgot how to frame a shot. We're also introduced to characters called Neimoidians, and I really don't like them. They're lame, they look like frogs, and they're terrible. And the way they talk is just so animated, there's nothing cool about it, it's just ridiculous. They're terrible villains, and they have no backstory, nothing fleshes these guys out. And we are also introduced to this character named Princess Amidala, and she just speaks with a very dull and lifeless tone. Luckily, this is kind of justified later in the film why she speaks this way, but it still doesn't help the film at all. And of course, along with Princess Amidala, we just get another terribly boring written political scene. Now, to this film's credit, they do show a lot of holograms, people communicating through holograms anyway, and anytime they show holograms, those look pretty good. It's some of the best animation in this film. It looks a lot like the original Star Wars films. I actually do enjoy the way the holograms look. But again, this first act is just littered with terrible CGI. All the sets, all the creatures are all CGI, and this doesn't make the film timeless. We are then introduced to a creature called a Gungan, whose name is Jar Jar Binks, played by Ahmed Best, and his character is just annoying, and of course he's just completely CGI, and it looks terrible. And of course Qui-Gon Jinn wants to bring Jar Jar Binks along for the journey. Why? I cannot believe the Force informed Qui-Gon Jinn to bring this Jar Jar character along with him, because considering what happens to him in the future, he is of no help. Qui-Gon Jinn says, and I quote, "This Gungan may be of help." The worst part about the first act of this film, too, is that it just doesn't feel like Star Wars. It's very dull, it's not fun. The only thing feeling like Star Wars is the score by John Williams, but it feels like a tug-of-war game where George Lucas is trying to make something of a different tone, and John Williams is doing a musical score for Star Wars. Now, the thing I'll give this first act is it has a lot of great moments with the character of Darth Sidious, but unfortunately, they're all involving Neimoidians. What are these Neimoidians doing in this movie? I can't stand them. Now, finally, in this first act, you get an action scene in the main hangar, and that actually really does feel like Star Wars. Unfortunately, it involves battle droids, which are really, really dumb in terms of design and the way that they speak. I can't stand it. It's very monotone.
That doesn't compute. You're under arrest.
Also, we get a pretty good space battle, and we are finally introduced to R2-D2, which is fantastic. He really makes this movie for me, for the moments that he's there. Then we're introduced to a villain named Darth Maul, who's cool in appearance, and he's actually well written. In the middle of this film, they do go to a location named Tatooine, and Tatooine looks fantastic in this movie. I actually really like the design for Tatooine. Then we meet a creature called the Tidarian named Watto, who's actually probably the best looking CGI in this entire film. At least he looks pretty good for 1999. Then of course we meet a young boy named Anakin Skywalker on Tatooine, and Jake Lloyd, who plays him, is a bad actor. I'm sorry, he's just not good. They also try to integrate a lot of comedy into this section of the film, and it sucks. It's not funny at all. And a lot of the story that's happening on Tatooine is actually pretty good in concept, just the execution of it all is terrible. Then we meet a character named Sebulba, and he's a creature called a Dug, and the CGI for him looks terrible, but the character is still kind of cool in concept. I actually do like the way the character's written, and I think he's kind of intimidating, so I enjoyed that about him, but the way he looks is just awful. Also on Tatooine, we get to see some sandstorms. I actually really like the way the sandstorms look. They look pretty cool and they're shot well. And we also get to meet a character named Shmi Skywalker, who is Anakin Skywalker's mother, and oh my god, Pernilla August is fantastic in this movie, and she's very well written. She might be the most well written character in this entire film, and nobody ever talks about that character or that actress and how well she did. Now there's a dinner scene in the middle section of the film, and it's actually one of my favorite scenes. It's actually well written, well shot. It has some really good dramatic tension going on within it. I like it a lot. Also in the middle of this film, we get to see C-3PO in his early stages without parts, and C-3PO is just awesome.
3PO is just a hunk of plastic, and without Tony Daniels in there, it just isn't anything at all.
Thanks, George. Well said. I actually really do enjoy the friction between the characters of Watto and Qui-Gon Jinn in this film. I think that stuff works very well. But I really hate the flashes we get of Obi-Wan as Qui-Gon's communicating with him, because all I want to do is stay with that character. Obi-Wan is just kind of cool and edgy in this film, and he seems really relatable because he seems like the guy who's just kind of going with things to survive. By the way, we are introduced to a term in this film called metachlorians, and that's just dumb. Because apparently in order to have the Force, you have to be made up of little organisms called metachlorians, and that just takes away the mystery of the Force, and I think that really diminishes something that could have been awesome in this film. And I don't care what you say, pod racing is awesome. The pod racing scene in this film is fantastic. They go fast, they sound cool, that entire scene feels like Star Wars. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and it also spawned one of my favorite video games as a kid. By the way, there's a line that Jake Lloyd uses in this film, and he uses it twice as Anakin Skywalker to execute his excitement, I suppose. It's terrible. But something I gotta say though is the reveal of Darth Maul's lightsaber in this film is great. Darth Maul has one of the coolest lightsabers in all of Star Wars. But later on in this film we are introduced to the character of Yoda, and if you had this film on VHS, Yoda was a practical character. He was actually a puppet, but since they've updated it, and if you have it on Blu-ray, you'll see that Yoda is now CGI, and CGI Yoda just looks terrible. We are also introduced to a character named Mace Windu, played by Samuel L. Jackson, and Samuel L. Jackson's just very cool, and of course he plays Mace Windu very well. He's awesome. But in the middle section of the film, there's just a series of political scenes that are just so dull and boring. Here's the thing, Star Wars politics are great when they're done right. We've seen this in Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, Bloodline by Claudia Gray, and Queen Shadow by E.K. Johnston. Also, amongst these political scenes, we get more of the character Jar Jar Binks, and he is just serving no purpose to the story. I can't stand him in this movie. I don't understand why he is a character. Now, many Star Wars fans have theorized that Jar Jar Binks was originally supposed to be a villain secretly, and that was going to be a twist in future Star Wars films. Unfortunately, he was hated out of these films by fans. Now, the environment of Coruscant is actually really cool in this movie in terms of design, but again, there's just a lot of CGI going on. And though I don't like the look of Yoda in this film, depending on which version of this film that I'm watching, I still did enjoy his writing. I think that he was very well written, and George Lucas certainly remembered how to write for that character. And also, I really do like the idea of having a Jedi Council. All the Jedi just sat around and, had meetings. Most of it was politics, but it was still pretty cool. And as this film starts to wrap up, I really do like seeing the master and apprentice relationship that Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi have. I think that that's some of the best stuff in the film, and it works really well. I will say, in the third and final act of this film, though, we do get the best political moment in the entire film, and it's actually pretty good. I was glad to see that there was one moment that really works in terms of politics. And at the end of this film, there are 3 action sequences happening simultaneously to each other, and I actually like the way that they're stitched together. However, one action sequence is very, very boring, while another one is a space battle that's decent, but mimics a lot of things we've seen before. But the lightsaber stuff in this third act is actually really epic and awesome. It's the best part of this film by far, and it's as Star Wars as this film gets. It's well choreographed, it's decently shot. I do enjoy it quite a bit. And John Williams' musical score backing this finale is some of the best Star Wars music we've ever heard. Hats off to John Williams here, man. He's a legend. Now, I do enjoy the interior of Theed's palace in this final act. It's one of the few practical sets in the entire film. It was actually shot in Italy, thank God. And at the end of the film, we are actually treated with some pretty good drama, and I do enjoy the ending quite a bit. I think it might make the movie work, in all honesty. So in the end, Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace can be a real drag, but it has a lot of great ideas that were just poorly executed, unfortunately. And it's always fun to go back and analyze a Star Wars film. I will never mind doing that entirely, even with some of the more boring ones. Every Star Wars film has something good about it, let's be honest, so I don't mind going back to watch them. And of course, I joked a lot about George Lucas's filmmaking, but honestly, he could do circles around anybody when it comes to storytelling. The concepts and the layers the guy just thinks of, I have no idea where his imagination wanders to, but I love it. Guys, as you can tell, Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace is obviously a mixed bag for me, but I'm going to go ahead and give this film a C+. Thanks for watching this review, guys. This was a lot of fun to do. I am a massive, massive Star Wars fan, and I cannot wait for the release of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. If you want to support the content today, guys, please do subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with your friends, and I'll also be putting my Twitter and Instagram in the description below, so be sure to follow me there. I appreciate it very much, and leave some feedback in the comments section, will you? This has been a review of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I've been Don Martino. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time.